All right, so we've already looked at those integer rules for adding. Now we're going to be looking at subtracting. So same thing, we're going to look at it first using number lines and counters and zero pairs, and then we are going to look at it using those rules. So a zero pair is a pair of numbers whose sum, as we said, is 0, right? So we have those pairs. We've got something that represents +1, something that represents -1, and together they equal 0. So we start with the basics again. Positive minus a positive. So we're starting at 8. When we subtract a positive, we go to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 8 minus 5 is 3. Now let's look at, instead of positive minus a positive, positive minus a negative. So we've got 3. And this looks weird. We've got minus a negative value. Well, when we subtract a positive, we go to the left. So if we're subtracting a negative, we do the opposite. We actually go to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which brings us to 9. That's weird. We have all of those negatives in there, and yet it still is a positive. So let's think about this with zero pairs. We started with 3 positives, and we need to take away 6 negatives, but there's no negatives to take away. So what we are going to do is we're going to add in 0 pairs. I'm going to add 6 0 pairs in so that I do have 6 negatives that I can take away. So when I'm doing that, now I have 6 negatives that I can take away. I can take away 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can take those away, and now I'm left with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 positives there. All right, let's look at another one. We've got 2 minus -5. So I'm starting at 2. I'm subtracting a negative. When we subtract positive, we go to a left, so subtracting negative goes to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which puts us at 7. So again, I started with 2 positives. I'm taking away 5 negatives, but I don't have any negatives to take away. So I'm going to bring in my 0 pairs. Now I have 5 negatives that I can take away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What am I left with? I'm left with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 positives. And let's look at one more. So we started at 1. We are subtracting a negative. When we subtract a negative, we go to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which puts us at 8. And again, if we look at this with 0 pairs, we started with 1 positive. We need to take away 7 negatives, but we don't have any to take away. So I'm going to bring in some 0 pairs. And one more 0 pair. Now we have 7 negatives that we can take away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What are we left with? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 positives. What you might notice here is, how do we get to 9 from 3 and 6? Really, this is kind of like we're just adding 3 plus 6, 2 plus 5, 1 plus 7. So we can kind of have this rule that when you're subtracting a negative, they kind of cancel each other out and you're really just adding. All right, let's look at a negative minus a negative. So we're starting at -9. When we subtract positive, we go to the left. When we subtract a negative, we go to the right. So I'm going to the right 1. which puts me at -8. If we think about this with 0 pairs, we started with 9 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We are taking away 1 negative. Sorry, we started with 9 negatives. We're taking away 1 negative. What are we left with? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Just remembering that subtraction means taking away. And then another one. Starting at -5, we're subtracting -7. So when we subtract a negative, we go to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which puts us at 2. Thinking about it with 0 pairs, we started with 5 negatives. We're taking away 7 negatives. The problem is we only have 5 negatives to take away. I need 2 more negatives. The only way I can get 2 more negatives is by adding 2 more 0 pairs. Now when I take away my negatives, I take away 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That leaves me with 2 positives. What you might notice looking here is, how do we get to 8 from 9 and 1? We're doing subtraction. We have this same minus and negative thing that we saw up there, which we said was basically like a plus sign. So if we look at this with those adding integers rules, we've got opposites that we find the difference. Opposites that we find the difference. One more type that we're going to look at, negative minus a positive. So we're starting at -1. We're subtracting a positive. When we subtract a positive, we go to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. That puts us at -5. We're taking more away. Our numbers are getting smaller. We're at -5. Thinking of 0 pairs, we had -1. We want to take away 4 positives. We don't have any positives to take away, so I need to add in these 0 pairs. Now I have 4 positives to take away. 1, 2, 3, 4. What am I left with? 5 negatives. Number 8, we're at -4. When we subtract a positive, we go to the left. 1, 2, 3. That puts us at -7. Thinking of it with counters, we started with 4 negatives. We want to take away 3 positives. I don't have 3 positives, so I need to add 3 0 pairs. Now I can take away 3 positives. And I'm left with 7 negatives. One more, we're at -5. Subtracting +4, which means we're going to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. Which leaves us at -9. We started with 5 negatives. We're taking away 4 positives, but we don't have 4 positives, so I need to add in these 0 pairs. Now we have 4 positives we can take away. 1, 2, 3, 4. What are we left with? 9 negatives. So if we kind of look at this, how do we get to 5 from 1 and 4? We add them. And if we think about this, we've got -1. And if we kind of think of this subtraction as negative, we have a negative and a negative, which are the same, so we find the sum. We have a negative and a negative, which are the same, so we find the sum. Negative and a negative, which are the same, so we find the sum. So basically, what we're going to be doing here is applying those same addition rules. So when we are adding with the same sign, we find the sum. When we're adding with different signs, we find the difference. So we're going to kind of look at everything still as an addition problem. So let's look at number 1. Actually, I'm going to go through and I'm going to highlight first. No, I'm not. I'm going to do that after. Sorry. The only thing that I'm going to say to be careful of is these problems when you see the minus a negative. I'm going to go through those and I'm going to change those to a positive. We are adding 6. So I changed that. Now I have a positive 4 and a positive 6, which are the same. So we find the sum, which is 10. Since it was positives, it's 10. Over here, I see that minus and negative again. I'm going to make those into positive because that's what we discovered. Now I'm going to look. I've got a negative and I've got a positive, which are opposites. So we find the difference, which is 8. I have 7 negatives and I have 15 positives. There's more positive, so it's positive. All right, here we've got negative 11 and negative 14. They're the same, so we find the sum, which is 25, and we were adding negatives, so it's negative. Here again, I see that minus a negative. I'm going to turn that into a plus right away. Now I have a negative and a positive, which is the opposite. So we find the difference, which is 4. There's 18 negatives and 14 positives. There are more negatives, so it's negative. Number 5, we have negative 3 and negative 21. They are the same, so we find the sum, which is 24, but we're looking at negatives, so it's negative 24. Number 6, I see these 2 negatives here, so I'm going to make that into a plus. We've got negative 9 and positive 1. Those are different, they're opposites, so we find the difference, which is 8. There's 9 negatives and 1 positive, so there's more negatives. All right, here, being careful because we have to do these in the 2 steps. So first, I'm just looking at these 2. I've got 10 and negative 42. Those are different, so I'm going to find the difference, which is 32. There's 10 positives, 42 negatives, so there's more negatives. Now I'm going to bring everything else down, the minus negative 13. When I see that minus a negative, I'm going to turn that into a plus. Now I have negative 32 and positive 13. Those are different, they're opposites. So I find the difference, which is 19. There's 32 negatives and 13 positives, so there's more negatives. Number 18, starting with these 2 first. We have negative 4 and negative 27. They are the same, so we find the sum, which is 31, and they are negatives. Bring down the minus 5. Now we have negative 31, negative 5. They're the same, so we find the sum, which is 36, and we are adding negatives. And then last thing, looking at absolute value. Again, we look at this absolute value kind of like parentheses. We do it first. So I have negative 5 and negative 11. Those are the same. We find the sum, which is 16. So we get negative 16 for the absolute value. What is the absolute value of negative 16? That is positive 16. Bring down the 12 minus. Now we have positive 12, negative 16, which are different. So we find the difference, which is 4. There are 12 positives, 16 negatives, so it's negative. Over here, doing it within the parentheses first. When I see this minus a negative, I turn that into a plus. We have positive 22, positive 3, which is 25. Bring down everything else. Find the absolute value of 25, which is 25, not negative 25. Remember, it's always that positive value. Bring down the minus 10 minus. Now we have negative 10, negative 25. They are the same, so we find the sum, which is 35. They were negatives, so it's negative.